with us today. Rabbi Rosner and myself go back a really, really long time, more than some people here might think, all the way back to Seabay and Highland, my family, a really, really, really long time ago. But more recently in Camp Kaylee, spending the summer together, which is a big success for myself. To be able to learn from someone like Rabbi Rosner, who has a tremendous impact on our community, whether it be through the Daf Yomi Shirim, or obviously now teaching in Machon Lev, where a bunch of our Talmidim will be next year, and also running a Kehila and Beit Shemesh. Tremendous amount of hashpah that he has in our community in so many different ways and aspects. So it's a really, really tremendous success to have Rabbi Rosner with us and share some words of Torah before Pesach, and really just slow down and allow ourselves to take a deep breath after a tremendously long and busy week. To be able to just come and be able to listen to some words of Torah is a really big success.
Amazing. And if there's a Mitzvah, what do we do with this?
If there's a siren, we all know where to go, but there's like 3 different ones. Probably.
Okay. Great to be here. Great to be back here, not only on Hoshana Rabbah night, when I don't know what time it is, but great to be here out of that context, and really wonderful to be here talking to all of you, and then also B'ez Hashem talking to the pre-Giyus guys afterwards. But again, it's we have Yehuda here is also representing Machon Lev for any questions. There's some swag in the back, but really it's an option for those who are thinking to recognize that the tilt of Am Yisrael is really in the land of Israel right now, and to have options of a Torah environment at the same time as getting a degree. Baruch Hashem, look us up, and we're here to give that option. And Baruch Hashem, it's good for me to be part of it. Okay, but let's talk a little bit today about the Inyani Pesach. So I asked whether we should do a greatest hits Haggadah shir or a Pesach topic, and we'll save the Haggadah for another time. So I was told the Pesach shir, which is hopefully Haggadah related. But those who want, I brought some Haggadahs and the other Hebrew Pesach Sefer, which is Shabbos HaGadol Drushes, those who would want to purchase for after. Okay, let's talk about, I spoke about a time, anybody here last year when I spoke at this time of year? Okay, 3. So I had a topic and then I switched it this morning because I realized I might have given it last year. And I checked my notes and I think I did. I said there might be an overlap, so that's why I'm doing a different one, a different topic. So Pesach is the only holiday that has 2 parts on the Jewish calendar. If you think about it, it's the only night of the year that the only holiday of the year that we don't say Shechianu. Right? The Shmini Atzeres, we say a Shechianu. So that's a separate holiday. Right? Hazar Kashav, the Gemara says. Shavuos and Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. Right? They all get Shechianus. But the last days of Pesach do not get a Shechianu. Right? Halakas Neiros, Yantif, right? All the women know. Right? The only night you don't say Shechianu is the end of Pesach. So why is it 2 stages? Is there a message that there is a 2-stage process going on here when we think of Pesach? Question 1. Question 2. We know that last night of Pesach is Shiras Hayam. That's the night of Az Yashir, a week after we went out of Mitzrayim. And the question that we can ask even without looking at the Medrash is why they only say Shira then. No, after the Makos, that wasn't enough. Right, the Ramban points out the purpose of the Makos was to Hashgachas Hashem, the 3 psukim, Ki Lashem Haaretz, Ein Kamoni B'chal Haaretz, the most miraculous time period in the history of the world, Makas B'choros, that's not good enough for Shira. That's not good enough. We didn't even know there was going to be a Kriyas Yamsuf. So we might have gone through the whole process without singing Shira. Look at Gemara Sanhedrin. Kadosh Baruch Hu got upset at Chizkiyahu HaMelech. He could have been Mashiach, but he didn't say Shira. So, what was different about Shiras Hayam, about that experience of Kriyas Yamsuf? Okay, we reach certain levels, but you have to be on that level. Rasa Shivcha Layam Ashalara Yecheskel Ben Buzi. And again, we'll send out more sheets for those who don't have the sheets, but we'll send out more after if you'd like the Marmakomos. And it's Dafka Oz Yashir Moshe. Oz, at that moment in time, that's when Shira happened. A lot of drushes the Gemara has by Oz. But Oz, the Medrash in source number 1, Miyom Shebarak Kadosh Baruch Hu Sa'olam. V'yad Sha'amdu Yisrael Alayam. From the beginning of time until Kriyas Yamsuf lo matzinu adam sham Mashiach Kadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. Right? It was Shira. Alor Shira, Avram Avinu was saved from the Kivshon Aish. No Shira. Yitzchak was saved from the Akedah. Interesting parallel. No Shira. Yaakov ben Amalek. No. Kivit Shabbat Yisrael v'nikra lehem miyad amru Shira v'nei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what is it about that moment that was different? And it seems to be the question of the Yerushalmi. Baruch Hashem, I have the schus now of giving a Yerushalmi shiurim. There's in Daf Yomi, the Daf Yomi Yerushalmi. So Baruch Hashem, when the OU asked me 2 years ago, so I said no. And they asked me again. They had another person call me. They said, no, really, start giving. It's the new cycle is starting. I know Hidur just finished, and our school just finished. I'm like, really, who's going to listen? So they said, just start brachas. They knew if they get me with brachas, they knew I'm done. So Baruch Hashem, and there's like over 1,000 downloads every day. It's crazy. But what's the message? It used to be that if you quote something and nobody ever heard of it, you could say, oh, it's a Yerushalmi. But now you can't say that anymore because people are actually learning Yerushalmi. So now you have, it's a Zohar. I don't think there's Zohar Yomi yet. But now you can say it's a Zohar. Oh, it's a Zohar. Okay. But the Yerushalmi seems to ask this question. Right? Why did they see Shira when they went out of Mitzrayim? Makas Bechoros. Answers the Yerushalmi in source number 3. Shan Yehi Shitchilas Gulasan. That was only the beginning. That was only the beginning. What do you mean? They didn't know that was only the beginning. They didn't know that they were going to chase after them. Right? They were running out. Get out of here! They didn't know there was going to be another stage. Right? They thought this was it. So what does the Yerushalmi mean? This is only Tchilas Gulasan. We didn't reach the final stage of Geula yet. Furthermore, the Magen Avraham writes in Hilchas Kriya Shema, in source number 5, V'nira li, we know there's a mitzvah daraisa of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim every single day and night of our life. Or we paskin, Yimei Chayecha Yomim, Kol Yimei Chayecha Leilos, Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. Once a year there's a mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, on the Seder night. But every day and night there's a mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. We fulfill that by saying the third parsha of Kriya Shema. There's a mystery why the Rambam doesn't count it as a separate one of the 613, but that's not for now. But the Magen Avraham says, if you mention Kriyas Yamsuf, that's Yotze, your mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. The Nir Ali, Magen Avraham, source 5. To Kol Shekain, Im Amar Shiras Hayam Diyatza. If you mention Shiras, it's not only your Yotze, it's a Kol Shekain. Kal V'chomer. If you say Shira, really? Ask the Chassam Sofer, and ask his father-in-law, Bekiva Eger. What are you talking about? Shiras Hayam, Kriyas Yamsuf. That's after Kriyas Yamsuf. That's after Yitzias Mitzrayim. You could say, do you also have to mention Kriyas Yamsuf in addition to Yitzias Mitzrayim? That I can understand. You have to go through the whole process. And we do that. We're machmir, right? In V'yatziv and in Ve'emunah Kol Zos, we mention Kriyas Yamsuf. But what does the Magen Avraham mean? That if that's all you mention, that's good enough. Says the Chassam Sofer, source number 6. I'm not so sure about this. Right? It's not mentioned there. Kiyim Kriyas Yamsuf, Atorek Pidlan, Tizgram Yom Tzei, the day that you left. But it's like subsumes the Yitzias Mitzrayim. Like how is it? It's the next stage. Why would that be good enough? Ask the Chassam Sofer, and again Rabbi Kiva Eger also on Shulchan Aruch on that same siman. If you look at the next, turn over the page. So he quotes Rabbi Kiva Eger quotes his son-in-law, the Chassam Sofer. Chatni Yagon Rav Moshe Bezdin the Pressburg. That's I like to play at all our family and something when Talmidim are over. I like to play Jeopardy. I like trivia. So sometimes I have in-laws and outlaws. I like that category. So it's always a question. The famous in-law and they're not in-laws, right? But in-laws, the father-in-law, son-in-law. Right? There aren't so many famous ones. There are a number of them in the Achronim. But here you have it. So he says, look at what my son-in-law wrote in his tshuva. That Zehisegal said, Rahman HaKavin Lantizkar. So what's the Magen Avraham's pshat? Right, the Magen Avraham says you could just say Kriyas Yamsuf. How is that Motzi Ma'chiv of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim? One final question. So far, we basically asked, why is there a 2-stage holiday? What exactly happened on Shvi Shal Pesach that was different? That Dafka then they said Shira? Number 3, how could that be Motzi What does the Yerushalmi mean? Is Tchilas Gulasan, not Sof Gulasan? How could the Magen Avraham say that Kriyas Yamsuf is enough to be Motzi Zechiras Yizis Mitzrayim? And finally, last question. The Gemara in Shabbos Kuflam Gimel, source number 8, quotes the mitzvah, the idea of Hidur mitzvah. Beautifying a mitzvah. The source of that concept of beautifying a mitzvah is there in Shabbos Kuflam Gimel in the 19th parak. Source number 8. Ze Keli v'yanveyu. That pasuk is what Bnei Yisrael said at Kriyas Yamsuf. Ze Keli, this is my God. Chazal say whenever he says the word Ze or Zos, it always means it's clear you can point to it. Right? B'neinu Zes or Moreh. Right? The parents point to the child. HaChodesh has Ze lachem. You point to the moon. Right? V'Ze ma'isa menorah. Moshe didn't know how to do it, so Hashem showed him a menorah. V'Ze. Ze is always, and that's why Rashi quotes the beginning of Matos that Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah wasn't only Koamar Hashem, but it was Ze hadavar. Because Moshe had the clarity that other prophets didn't have. Ze. It always means Ze with clarity. So, they said, at Kriyas Yamsuf, we had such clarity of vision, we said, Ze Keli v'yanveyu. But Chazal Darshan, from that pasuk, Hisnoya l'fanav mitzvahs. Make your mitzvahs beautiful. Aseh l'fanav sukkah noah, lulav noah, shofar noah, tzitzis noah, which is interesting, the Achronim talk about it. What is tzitzis noah? The strings or the beged? And is the beged the Chesed Shal Mitzvah, or is it just the strings? Tzitzis noah, Sefer Torah noah, beautiful, Hidur mitzvah. At that moment in history, that's when we decided that we want to do Hidur mitzvah. That's when we recognized that concept. Ze Keli v'yanveyu. Like, what was it at that moment that we decided, we want to be mahader in mitzvahs. We don't want to just do the mitzvah. We want to do it in a beautiful way. Right? There has to be it's not just an asmachta. Pashas it's a din daraisa. Right? Hidur mitzvah. What does that have to do with Kriyas Yamsuf? Right? They had such clarity that they wanted to be mahader the mitzvah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Hidur mitzvah to start answering the last question, and then we'll get back to some of the earlier questions. One other ha'ara. It's pointed out the Rambam does not mention Hidur mitzvah anywhere in Mishnah Torah. He doesn't quote the Gemara. You would think the Rambam would quote Hidur mitzvah. Rav Asher Weiss in the Minchas Asher in source number 9, he says, well, maybe the Rambam thinks it's a Midas Chasidus. It's not a Me'ikr Hadin, and the Rambam doesn't quote every Midas Chasidus that the Gemara quotes. It's a nice thing. Ein kan hilchos psikta. Midas Chasidus van Hagar Re'uya. After all, Hashem didn't say, do Hidur mitzvah. We accepted upon ourselves. Ze Keli v'yanveyu. Eino tzivim me'es HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kacham B'nei Yisrael b'shiras hayam. That just begs the question. So what? It wasn't even mitzvah, so we accepted it. And is there any other way that we could explain why the Rambam doesn't quote it? It seems like a real hardcore mitzvah, or halacha, not just a midas chasidus. Right? There are some times that Hidur mitzvah is even ma'akev. What must you learn this year? Baba Kama. Oh, so Hidur mitzvah comes up in the next verse. Okay, we'll get to it. But remember the first Rashi in Lulav HaGazol? Right? Hidur mitzvah, Yavesh is possible because of Hidur mitzvah. It's an example, right? Yavish is possibly kuba. Tosfos says, how can it be Zek Keli v'yanveyu? It's not ma'akev. There are examples where Hidur mitzvah is ma'akev the mitzvah. Mostly not. So what's going on? So let's talk a little bit about Hidur mitzvah. Many of you might be familiar with this if you're learning Baba Kama. Maybe you'll learn this on Daf Tes. Gemara Daf Tes base. The Gemara says, Hidur mitzvah. A little lumdus now. 10, 12 minutes of lumdus, and then we'll get back to what I love to do is to relate the lumdus to the hashkafa and the message that we're trying to get through. So the Gemara Baba Kama Daf Tes tells us, Hidur mitzvah, ad shlish b'mitzvah. So Hidur mitzvah, you got to spend a third more. If you have a beautiful esrog, and you can get an even better one, you have to spend a third more. A third of what? Ask the Gemara. Right? Shlish mi lago or shlish mi lavar? Teku. Right? Is it a third of what? So let's say you have an esrog, like Rashi says, is you have a one that's you could buy for 6. So the Gemara is saying, do you have to spend a third more? A third of 6? So you have to spend 8? Or is it a third after you add on the third? So it's 9, right? It's half of what? Of your mitzvah. What's that? suffix about? Why would I say you take a third of the item, or do you take a third of after the Hidur is added on? It ends up being a third. Like, is there a lumdus behind that? Just a detail? One issue. There is a machlokes. I think all of us probably followed the Shulchan Aruch on this one. There's a machlokes between the Shulchan Aruch and the Gra about lighting Hanukkah candles. Lighting Hanukkah candles. Let's say it's the third night of Hanukkah. Right, the first night of Hanukkah, what do? I put a candle all the way on the right side, and that's the one I light. That's the only one. What about all the other nights? Now I have like 5. So what's my order? What is the Shulchan Aruch Paskin? What do we all do? You light the one all the way on the left. You light the one all the way on the left. The newest candle. You light the newest candle every night. You light the newest candle. And then you slide. Right? Right? So what? Just halacha maisa, one should make sure that when they line up to light the candle, they're a little to the left of their menorah, Chanukiah. Because you want your hand to be in front of the one that you're about to light. Because if your hand's all the way over, if you're sitting in front of the menorah and your hand's all the way to the right, you got to go ein mavir al mitzvos, right? You got to like pass over a couple of candles and then move over. So Machronim say you should try to make sure to like lined up a little left, so your hand that you're gonna light. But that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Shulchan Aruch says in Hilchos Chanukah, source 12, Yaschel lahalik b'ner rishon b'ner yoser yemini. You light the candle that is all the way to the right. That's the first night. Ubelel beis kishe Yosef ner echad samachlo. And on the second night, when you add on a candle, Yaschel yivarech ala nosaf shu yoser smali. So you light on the newest one, which is all the way to the left. Kidei, why? Because the rule is in halacha, kol pino shatapona, ein apona el derech yamin. You always turn to the right. You want to go to the right. So I want to light the totally left candle, and then I move to the right. Right? By boi b'shalom, supposed to swivel to the right. Right? By when you go up to the Mizbeach, all those Kohanim amongst us, Meiri Bana Beis HaMikdash, when you go up the ramp, you can make a right. Even if you're doing something on the left. Right? You make a right when you go up to the right. Because kol pino shata pona. Hagba is a machlokas. Right? Which way do you turn by Hagba? Do you turn to the right, or do you show the Torah to the right first? Whatever you do. But anyway, v'chein b'leil gimel. Kishi Yosef od acher samach l'shtei neros harishonos. Yasla b'nosav, you always go to the new. That's what we do. Nimsa, says the Shulchan Aruch, shetamid mavarach ala nosav. You always make the bracha on the newest candle, shehu mora ala nes. Because that's mora on the nes. That reflects there another night and another night. Shrei b'tosefas hayamim nitosef hanes. And says the Gra, I beg to differ. Says the Gra, you're making the bracha on the extra candle. The extra candle. Says the Gra, what's the nusach habracha we say? Lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. Right? We know ner ishu beso. That's the ikar mitzvah. Right? We don't change the nusach. Right? One mitzvah is the ikar. How could you make the bracha on the extra? Says the Gra. You make the bracha on the extra. You make the bracha on the mitzvah. Don't make a bracha on the fluff. Right? The ein lo tam v'reach, says the Gra. Right? This is not the mareach. Shezeh eino, the extra candles, rak l'mahadrim and mahadrim. V'yaniach ikar mitzvah v'yivarach al rishus. You can make the bracha on the extra candle? Says the Gra, no. Says the Gra, and we don't do this, but says the Gra, because you want to get this extra, go to the right. So you start with you make a bracha on the Hidur. Says the Gra, no. You know what the Gra says? Let's say it's the 5th night. You know what the Gra says to do? You make the bracha on all the way on the right. You make the bracha on that candle, the Iker Mitzvah. Then you slide all the way to the left. You make a bracha on the all left candle. You did Ein Mavir in a little bit, but you don't have a choice. And then Kol Pino Shatapona, you go to the right. You don't say that. Kol Pino Shatapona. Because you want to make the bracha on the Iker Mitzvah. And then you want to get Kol Pino Shatapona, okay. Ein Mavir, and what can you do? Elo Iker Sheyasla B'ner Samach LePesach Bein Malik B'Yimim V'Deva V'Yivar Chol Aleos Baza Ubazeh Malik Mark Tamin Al Samach, and that's how the Sharatzian and others explain the Gra. What's that machlokas about? The Nekudas machlokas between the Shulchan Aruch and the Gra. Shulchan Aruch says, no, you make the bracha on the newest candle. That's the Pirsa Manes, and you go to the right. While the Gra says, you don't. There's many other issues. We'll quote one more. The Brisker Rav made this one famous. So, before the Brisker Rav, you might say the Rambam made it famous. But the Gemara says in that Shabbos Kuflam Megimel, the Gemara says Shabbos Kuflam, source number 14, Tana Rabbanim, bottom of the page. Hamal, if somebody is doing bris milah, calls Manshu Osik B'milah, as long as he is involved in the milah, Choser Ben Al Tzitzin HaMa'akben HaSamilah Ben Al Tzitzin Shein HaMa'akben HaSamilah. We know when one does bris milah, and it's a big schus to do the milah. I've never done bris milah, and I don't plan on it. Baruch Hashem, we have 5 boys, and I made my shliach each time. You got to know yourself. I could give shir on milah and shchita, but I'm married to a doctor, but I am so far from anything related to that. So says the Gemara. So if somebody's involved in the milah, so we know there are parts of the foreskin that you have to cut off, and if you don't cut it off, the child is not called a mahol. And then there's extra. There's tzitz she'ena ma'akon milah. There's extra pieces that the Mesorah is that we also cut off and stretch out to make it look nice and neat. Hidur mitzvah. So says the Gemara, if you're involved in the milah, then obviously take off all the parts of the foreskin. The parts that you have to and the parts that we do. Piresh, but once you stop doing the milah, let's say, and then you go like, oh gosh, I didn't do what I was supposed to do, you only go back for the tzitzin that are ma'akev. You only go back if the child is still in RL. If you've done the basic, and the only thing that's left is tzitzin she'ena ma'akvin, you don't go back. You don't go back. What day of the week are we talking about here in the Gemara? Shabbos. Rashi says one word, Shabbos. Rashi says Shabbos. Meaning, according to Rashi, as long as you're involved in bris milah, you could do the whole thing, even the parts that you don't really need to do. But once you stop, you can't go back. That's Rashi. So it's fascinating. If you think, according to Rashi, it's Shabbos. What's Docha Shabbos? A bris milah. I'm even allowed to do parts of the milah that I don't need to do. I could do extra stuff. You know, there's some people that aren't moels, but they train to try to do the bris milah of their son. There are people that do that. My brother's a dentist. He's good. He's not a moel, but he practiced. If you're not a professional moel, you're not allowed to do a milah b'Shabbos. His oldest son, bris milah Shabbos, so all of his practice went to waste, and he couldn't do the milah. Why? He waited for the second son. He did it. Why? Because you might cut because you're not a professional. You might cut a little bit more than you're supposed to, and that's the issur of chavala b'Shabbos. And that's not docha. So only if you're a professional. You're a professional. What is Rashi saying here? Even if you're a professional, you're allowed to cut the tzitzin she'ena ma'akon milah. That's all considered part of the mitzvah. But the second that you stop doing the milah, no way, you can't. That's Rashi. So Rashi kind of puts the tzitzin she'ena ma'akon with and without. But if you look in the Rambam does not say a word about Shabbos. Where the Rambam quotes this Gemara, the Gemara doesn't say the word Shabbos. You're right, it's in Masechah Shabbos, and it kind of sounds that way from the Gemara. But the Rambam, turning the page, if you look in source number 16, the Rambam, when he quotes the Gemara, he doesn't say a word. Hamal calls man shosik b'milah on a weekday, on a Tuesday. As long as you're doing the milah, choser ben atizan ha'makvin be'etzah she'ena ma'akvin. Then you go back. Meaning you do the whole milah. Piresh, once you stop doing the milah on a Tuesday, you do not go back, even for the tzitzin. You don't go back for the tzitzin she'ena ma'akvin. And the question is, why not? What's the big deal? So you did the milah, you didn't do it in the perfect way, so just go back and finish it. According to Rashi, understand, it's Shabbos, you kind of finished it, you did what's okay for the Eved. So there is a question that is dealt with in various sugis and shas. Right, this is a chakira that's noted in at least 4 or 5, probably more that you could think of, sugis. The Achronim asked this question by Chatzi Shir. They asked the question by Lifnei Iver. They asked the question by the Mitzvah of Chinuch. What others? I tried to write some down beforehand. Those are the 3 that I wrote. What's the Chakira? Klali Prati. Klali Prati. What does that mean? Lifnei Iver of Treif. Lifnei Iver of Shabbos, lifnei iver of, are all those the same thing, what we call klali? It's all lifnei iver. Do I have a lifnei iver scorecard in Shamayim? Or do on every Avera in Shamayim, I have a lifnei iver section? That if you do lifnei iver of treif, it's a little bit of treif. If you do lifnei iver of the big three Avera, major, it's one of the machlokes, Rabban, Balamar, and the Ramban. Lifnei iver of the big three. Is it Yahar Gal Yavar? Somebody comes to me and says, convince Reuben to kill Shimon or I'm going to kill you. Do I have to give my life for that? Machlokes, Balamar, and the Ramban. Is lifnei iver part of the big three? Or no, it's a separate klali. So that's asked by lifnei iver, the mitzvah of chinuch. Every mitzvah or it's general? Hidur mitzvah. Is Hidur mitzvah part and parcel of every single mitzvah? Or is it just like a general Hidur mitzvah thing? Suggest, the Brisker Rav talks about this, and suggest some of the Achronim, that's the Machlokas Rashi and the Rambam. The Rambam says on a weekday you don't go back. You know why? Because Hidur mitzvah makes no sense independently. Hidur mitzvah means beautify the mitzvah. If the mitzvah's done, it makes no sense to beautify anything. You're finished. You're not being mahader the mitzvah. It's all one thing. Rashi might hold, no, there's independence. There's independence. On Shabbos, okay. But on a weekday, you go back. You're only going back for Hidur mitzvah, it's okay, you're going back for Hidur mitzvah. Hidur mitzvah is independent. Machlokas Rashi Rambam. Maybe that's the machlokas, the Shulchan Aruch and the Gra. The Gra says, you're going to make a bracha on Hidur mitzvah? What are you talking about? You make a bracha on the Iker mitzvah. The Hidur mitzvah is something extra. What's the Shulchan Aruch going to answer? No. Hidur mitzvah expands the mitzvah itself. It's all part of the same idea. I'm being mahader this mitzvah. I'm expanding. The mitzvah is 7 candles tonight. I'm making a bracha on an expanded Iker mitzvah. Hidur mitzvah expands what I'm doing. Not something separate. Says Rav Soloveitchik in the Rishimos on Baba Kama in Surah 17. Maybe that's the machlokes about milago or milavar. Right? Do you figure out a third once the Hidur mitzvah is added on? Because that's really part of your mitzvah. Is it a third of that? Or no, you figure out the Iker mitzvah and then you add on. See what the Rav says? V'yitachen, shua bir something b'gemara. Or let's read his first words. Yesh la'ayin. B'din Hidur mitzvah, no mami pasuk zek kelev yanveyu. Im chalu b'kiyam ha-mitzvah atzma. Is it part of the mitzvah itself, la'asosa mitzvah mu'ula? Make it a beautiful mitzvah. Ochi Hidur mitzvah, ma'ave mitzvah b'fnei atzma. There's a separate idea called Hidur mitzvah. Again, it's klali, it's general, it's separate, prati, it's part of every single mitzvah. So maybe that's milago milavar, maybe that's the Shulchan Aruch, maybe that's the Rashi and the Rambam. Again, there are many other chakiras. Can you make a bracha just on Hidur? Maybe this is even part. There's a machlokas rishonim whether Hidur mitzvah is a daraisa or derabana. Is that a din daraisa or a din derabana? It's learned that from a pasuk, but is that an asmachta or is that a real din daraisa? The Ritva says in a few places in Masechah Sukkah, Hidur mitzvah has to be derabanan because it's only lechatchila. Here's the Ritva's line. Tosfos says it in also Daf Gimel or so. You never have a din daraisa that's only lechatchila. There are many kashas on that line, but that's what the Ritva says. The fact that Hidur mitzvah by lulav is only a lechatchila, it must be a din derabanan. That's the Ritva Shita. Tosfos says that again. Many kashas on that, but others say no. It's a din daraisa. Din daraisa. Pashtus is that it's a din daraisa. Maybe that's also about whether it's klali prati. How do you say this? You might say it in one. I'll say it in one direction, but you might say it in the other direction. Maybe if it's a din darabanan, so it's an independent thing. It's a din darabanan. The Rabbanan came up with this chiddush called Hidur mitzvah. It's a din daraisa. It's part of the mitzvah itself. Let's take a step back. Hidur mitzvah, what does that reflect about us? When we're mahader in a mitzvah, especially according to the shita, that it integrates into the mitzvah. You know what Hidur mitzvah means? Hashem, we know what you told us to do, but we want to partner with you in creating something beautiful. We're not just going to do the minimum. Right? We want to add our own personal touch. We could get this esrog, but we're going to spend more. We can make a tzitzis, we can make a lulav, but we're going to make this a super. We're going to add on our own personal effect on this mitzvah. We take the mitzvah and we beautify it. We add in our own nofach mishalanu. Hidur mitzvah means we take part and become creative. And take part in the process. Hashem, you said do the minimum, we're doing more. That's the symbol of Hidur mitzvah for all of Avodas Hashem. Not being a b'diavad Jew. Not just doing what we could get away with. Doing mitzvahs in a lavish and maximalist way. That's what Hidur mitzvah is about. Kriyas Yamsuf. Why dafka at that moment did we start Hidur mitzvah? Did we recognize Hidur mitzvah? Because that moment was different than everything up until that moment. Up until that moment, ani v'lo malach, ani v'lo saraf. It was all HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did everything. Did all the, okay, Moshe lifted up his hands and stuck out the stick, but basically it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did all the makas, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, and all of a sudden, what happens at Kriyas Yamsuf? B'nai Yisrael, right, start davening. Vayitzaku b'nai Yisrael al Hashem. And then you have one of the most surprising psukim in the entire Torah. Sometimes you have a pasuk and you don't appreciate the pasuk. You don't appreciate the pasuk. Right, Bilam's going, and all of a sudden the donkey starts talking to Bilam and says, "Bilam, what are you doing?" What should the next pasuk be? And Bilam fainted. The donkey starts talking to you. What did the pasuk say? Bilam says, "Just stop it and keep going." What kind of pasuk is that? Sometimes you got to read the Torah and realize the Vayashkim Avram Aboker. That might mean, somebody once told me, it just means he went early in the morning. But if you say, sometimes in Vayashkim he got up, he was able to sleep the night before. Wow. You know, sometimes we have headaches, we can't sleep the night before, we have something the next day. But look at this pasuk. B'nai Yisrael start davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayitzaku b'nai Yisrael al Hashem. What does Hashem say? Source 24. What are you davening for? Stop it, just start walking. What are you davening for? What are you davening for? Rashi says, source 25. La Manushi and Moshe. Oh, Moshe's davening. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lo eitzad alach l'tfilah. It's not time to daven. It's not time to daven. It's not time to daven. Ask the Arachaim HaKadosh on that pasuk. What does a Jew do b'shas Sarah if not daven? That's what we do. What else should we be doing? At that moment, something changed. The Meshech Chochmah points out, at that moment, except Moshe Rabbeinu was always first. At that moment, Hashem says, Moshe, you go behind. You go behind. You're not going first. You're not going first. Right? Meshech Chochmah, source 26. The Kol B'nai Yisrael halchu achrei Moshe kitzon b'dika. They've been like sheep after a shepherd. Amnam bayam tziva HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe shis achareya. Moshe says, go behind. Vehema b'emunasa bo yelchu. They'll go in. Says the Arachaim HaKadosh. Remember, I heard this Arachaim HaKadosh probably about 20, 25 years ago, the first time. It's whoa. Says the Arachaim HaKadosh. What are they supposed to do? Not daven? Says, and only the Arachaim says, sometimes in life, Hashem says to Kal Yisrael, there are certain moments that even tefillah is not strong enough. But you know what I need you to do? I need you to act based on emunah. And that's going to bring the Yeshua. I need you to partner. I need you to help bring the Yeshua. I can't do it alone. Why is this? Rabbi Soloveitchik writes about this a lot. We don't understand this fully, why often in redemptions Hashem needs human players, but that's part of the Metzius. At Kriyas Yamsuf, that was the moment that Hashem said, it's up to you. I can't do this alone. You got to take the first step. The Arachaim HaKadosh says on the bottom of 27. Ein adavar tali biyadi. It's not up to me. Hagam shani chafetz. I want to do the nes. But this midas hadin, daber b'nei Yisrael v'yiso. Go into the water. Go into the water. And through that act, based on emunah, the Yeshua is going to come. At that moment where we started taking part in the process, that's when Hidur Mitzvah came into existence. Because Hidur Mitzvah is the siman of Avodas Hashem, of our being creative and taking part in the process. We're not just doing what Hashem told us to do, but we're adding on to it. We're adding on to it. That's what Kriyas Yamsuf was. The ultimate level of emunah is when we realize that Hashem obviously does everything for us, but when we realize that it's also our avoda to partner with Him. Daf get Kriyas Yamsuf, v'yaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdo. What does b'Moshe avdo mean? Doesn't it just mean Moshe? Rabbi Tzadok says that Moshe means humans. Rabbi Tzadok says in Tzidkas HaTzadik, Kishem 29, Kishem shetzorach adam la'amin b'Hashem yisbarach. Just like there's a mitzvah to believe in God, kach tzorach achar kach la'amin ba'atzmo. There's a mitzvah to believe in man. There's a mitzvah to believe in us. Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdo. That happened at Kriyas Yamsuf. When we believed and recognized that Hashem does so much in terms of Yeshuas Hashem, but there comes a time where we have to take part. Where we have to partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's what Hidur Mitzvah symbolized, and that's why we dafka sung Shira then. Because the ultimate level is when we recognize it's a partnership. He's the senior partner, obviously. But we had to jump in the water. We had to be our own bailim on the Yeshua. And that's the Yerushalmi, right? This is only Tchilas Gulasan, because it wasn't Hushlam, it wasn't completed yet until the moment that we said, I'm in it. I'm also taking part. And that's the Magen Avram. Kriyas Yamsuf, it's a Kol Shekain. What do you mean a Kol Shekain? Because the Kriyas Yisrael was all Hashem. Kriyas Yamsuf was Hashem and us. That recognition of the process, that's what we need to recognize. And it's not a separate holiday. It's building on part one. Part one is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Part two is our partnering with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Az Yashir, and that's the level, that's Shira. Always in history, Hashem always brings the Yeshua through human input. But to recognize that over the past 2.5 years, we have been able to partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu more than any time in the past 2,000. Rav Rimon talks about this a lot. But he had a few ha'aros, but says number one, he says, you might have heard him say this. He says, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have asked me before time, he says, you know what, I could zap you into any generation. You choose. You choose which generation you want to be in. Which generation would we have chosen? It would have been cool to meet Rabbi Akiva, but that wasn't such a great door for the Jewish people. The Rambam also. Great. I would love to meet the Rambam, but I know the Almahides didn't make it so nice. Right? So there's a lot of Doros. I remember talking about this with my wife. She's like, before air conditioning, forget it. You know? But which door? So Rav Rimon said, maybe the first 15, 20 years of Bayis Rishon. Maybe. That was... But he said, it's no contest. This door, when we feel the footsteps of Mashiach, when we get to take part in bringing Geulas Yisrael. He said, the Gemara says that we just spoke about, we needed to take part. How many of us jumped in? One. On October 7th, how many jumped in? 100,000 would be a low estimate. A generation of ours that's ready to partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The schus that we have to be on the level of Vayaminu b'Hashem of Moshe Avdo. And we had the schus of making a couple of weddings during this past couple of years. Boys were in and out of Aza, sons-in-law. So one of the chuppahs of one of my boys, as I said, which I think is an idea which is Amita Shal Torah. We know that Chazal talk about two areas of our life, Ben Adam Lamakom and Ben Adam Lachavero. And there's many midrashim about that, the two luchos, Ben Adam Lachavero. But the Achronim and the Vilna Gaon and others add on a third area, Ben Adam Lamakom, Ben Adam Lachavero, and Ben Adam La'atzmo. Man to man, man to God, and man between his own religious personality. But I think there's a fourth one. A fourth one that wasn't Lamaisa for 2,000 years, and that's why the Mefarshim didn't talk about it. It wasn't Lamaisa for the Gaonim or the Rishonim or the Achronim. Bein Adam La'amo. Between man and his nation. It's different than Ben Adam La'Chavero. Ben Adam La'Chavero is I could have a chesed organization, which is beautiful and amazing and wonderful. But when could I do something and I feel and I recognize that I'm carrying the nation on my back? That I'm doing something for the Am. That wasn't Lamaisa until Ardar. Whether it means somebody's on the battlefield or somebody is supporting the Chazit or the Oref, or really every Jew who moves to the state of Israel today is affecting the Am. It's not about Machavero. That's Ardar. That's Oz Yashir Moshe. At that moment, that's Hidur Mitzvah. We recognize that we could be part of it. We recognize that we could be Mishtatef. Doesn't mean that it's not painful at times and challenging and headaches, and it doesn't mean that if somebody's trying to figure out, am I going through Egypt or Greece or Athens, it's okay. You know, if you have family in Chutz La'aretz right now and you're trying to get back to be with Pesach, that's okay. But we recognize that wherever we are in the world, you know, we are living in unbelievable times. We're living in Kriyas Yamsuf times. We're living at times, there's no Shechiyana because it's really part of the earlier process. We get to be with HaKadosh Baruch. Just to end with a story that, right? This is a good time? This is supposed to, I don't know what I'm supposed to go till. I don't know. I might have mentioned this in the past, another shiurim, I don't remember. We can leave some time for questions or... the chassid once came to the Baal Shem Tov and said, Rebbe, I want to see Eliyahu Hanavi. And the Baal Shem Tov says, it's not so easy. He says, no, I know. The Gemara talks about, Tana and Amaram, they met Eliyahu Hanavi. I want to meet Eliyahu Hanavi. Some of you know this, but it's worth repeating. So, if you never heard it. So, he says, okay, he says, go to the next town for Shabbos, and you'll see Eliyahu Hanavi. He's like, yeah, just like that? He's like, yeah. He's like, great. So he's okay. So he says he doesn't know where Eliyahu Hanavi is going to come from, and maybe he had a long trip. The Gemara Eruvin says he comes from outside the Tchum, So he went and bought a big fruit platter, and he went to the next town to meet Eliyahu Hanavi. And he walks into shul. He's so excited. He looks around. Which Rebbe on the Mizrach wall is going to be? Eliyahu Hanavi. He's looking, and the Ola Koli, but he's like, which one is going to take off his shirt like Aleph, right? I don't know, but I don't know. They daven, and it's regular davening, and nothing. Everybody's walking on shul. Good Shabbos. You need a place to stay? No, I'm good. And the Shamish says, it's like, yeah, I was looking for somebody. I don't know. He goes out of shul. He's like, okay, I don't know what the Baal Shem Tov was talking about. So he goes. There's a house right next to the shul. He knocks on the door. Hello. A woman answers and says, yeah, I was supposed to be somewhere for Shabbos, and I'm here. I have all this fruit, and she's like, come in, kids, make room for our guest. Goes back to the Baal Shem Tov at the Shabbos, like, Rebbe, I didn't see him. Baal Shem Tov says, next Shabbos. Okay, you don't have conscious from the Baal Shem Tov. Next Shabbos, next Friday, he goes to the same, buys the big fruit platter. He goes to the town next door. He walks in. He's like, "Who's going to be here that wasn't here last week?" He's looking around. He seems like the same guys, same rabbanim. He's like, "What's?" He's looking around. Somebody new. And people are looking at him like, "Did you move in? Should we welcome you?" And he's like, "No. I'm just looking." He's like, at the end of davening already, start going out. So he's like, "Anybody?" The shamish is like, "Okay, no." Goes out again. He's very upset, crestfallen. Goes to the house, knocks on the door. Woman answers, "Hi." He's like, "Yeah, it's me again. I was just looking for a place to supposed to be." He's like, "Come in, it's okay." Goes back to the Baal Shem Tov. It's like, Rebbe, I went twice. Baal Shem Tov says, next Shabbos. Next Shabbos. He's like, really? He says, really. Next Shabbos. So he goes to bring the fruit platter, and he goes, and he walks into shul, and the second he walks into shul, he already has a terrible feeling inside. He's like, same people. Same people. It's not going to happen. He walks in, he like doesn't daven half the davening, he's just so upset, he's sitting in the back. Now everybody's looking at him like really like, you sure you didn't move in? You sure you didn't? He's like towards the end of the davening, he like ran out before the announcements. He's like, he didn't want to stay till the end. And he starts walking to the house. So he starts walking to the house again. He's about to knock on the door. And he hears from inside, the children will be screaming at their mommy, Mommy, we're starving, we have nothing to eat. What's going to be? And she says, don't worry. Maybe Eliyahu Hanavi is going to come again this Shabbos. Because we could all be Eliyahu Hanavi. If we bring a little geula, if we bring a little Yeshua to someone else, if we are able to partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we could be Eliyahu Hanavi. And we could be able to bring geulas and Yeshuas on the personal level and on the national level. Here at Shalom that we all recognize the amazing, challenging, yet unbelievable time period that we're living in right now. We don't realize it. Right now, we just focus on like headaches. And we focus on like, I want to live my life. I had a plan. And this isn't my plan. Right? So obviously, Hashem had a plan. And what I thought wasn't his plan. I'll just end with this. This is a great Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes writes in Kedoshim, right? At the beginning of Kedoshim, he says, there's a mitzvah, Ishi Mova Viv Tiro. There's a mitzvah, Mora of your parents. So it's Kibud and Mora. So Kibud means honoring, bringing them a drink. What's Mora? What's awe of your parents? Right? Not sitting in your father's chair. I remember growing up, my father had a study, and his dad, it was like, I wouldn't even go near the chair. Right? So, don't sit in your father's chair. It says this Sfas Emes, there's also Mora of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shalom Kechatira. Don't sit in God's seat. Don't sit in... Hashem's driving. I think you should get off at this exit. No, I think I'm going straight. No, he knows ways better than we do. No, I think you should go straight. No, I'm getting off here. It's like, no, you should... I'm getting off here. Don't sit in God's seat. Right? So we all had different plans. Hashem has a plan. We all got to just hold on for the ride. Recognize we're living in amazing, wonderful times. Amazing times that, B'ez Hashem, anybody who again, Shana Aleph, don't think about this yet, just think about coming Shana Bet. And, B'ez Hashem, but if you're Shana Bet, seriously, think about the schus it is to be able to build your life here in the land of Israel, whether it's going to the army, whether it's getting a degree, whether it's whatever it is. But if the option is, want to get a degree and join us in a Torah learning environment, in Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, you're just here to answer some questions. There's some swag in the back. I'm there. I can share every day there. This week on Zoom a little bit because no class is live, even though we're going in this week for a lunch and learn. That we can't do lunch and learn on Zoom. But Hashem. But please enjoy, and everybody should have a wonderful Chag Kosher V'Sameach in this Chodesh of Geula. We should be zocheh to a full Geula Shlema. There's also some scarm in the back. There's if anybody wants, if you want me to sign it, I can sign it after. Oh, really? What? The rap? Oh, really? Sure. Yeah, just meet with him. He was just right.